I'm going to read from Collide, my first novel, and I'm going to set up the scene a little bit. We have Hayden, who is the main love interest, and Leah is the main character. And Mark, we have a little bit of a triangle going on. Mark is our, and so Leah's in love with both people, basically. And we have, the scene I'm going to read from is the first time that the two men meet. So she's getting them together, and we'll finally see the macho stuff going on. So I hope you like it. Oh, he's here, Leah said, sitting up straight. Hayden's gaze lazily made its way out over to the door. Mark was escorted by the hostess to their table. Hayden looked him up and down. The guy was built, 1% body fat, if that. Even Hayden had to admit he was movie star handsome. Mark took his seat next to Leah and leaned in to kiss her. Hayden's stomach heaved when Leah pressed her lips to Mark. Hayden took a swing of his beer, finishing it off. Okay, need more alcohol, he thought. Then, this is Mark. Mark, this is Hayden, she said. Hey, nice to meet you, Hayden said, giving Mark his firmest handshake. It's a pleasure, Mark said courteously, groping back just as hard. I'm terribly sorry I'm late. Hayden sat back as Leah paused, her eyes darting from him to Mark and then finally to her drink. Hayden cleared his throat. So, he trailed off. I'm so glad we're doing this, she said. Mark nodded and smiled. Hayden took off his hat, scraped back his hair, and slipped it back on. What do you do? Mark asked him. Hayden signaled to the waiter before answering. I run a design company. I build and design websites, advertisements, marketing collateral, that kind of thing. How artistic, Mark replied, feigning a smile. The waiter dropped off glasses of water and took their order. Hayden made sure to order another beer. Mark's condescending tone still rang in his ears when he asked, what do you do? I'm a commercial real estate developer, mainly hotels, just wrapped up a project in Scottsdale. Looks like Chicago was next. Guy's money, Hayden thought. Good luck with that, Hayden said as the food arrived. He watched Leah as they were served. She shifted in her seat. Hayden could feel her cross her legs under the table, the tip of her shoe resting against his leg. Hayden nudged her foot with his knee under the table, and they exchanged smiles. It wasn't the same smile she gave Mark, but it was a smile nonetheless. So tell me how you two met, Mark said to Leah. Hayden thought, trying to score points? Leah beamed. We met at a pool hall, first year of college. I was out with Gary and Marie. Oh, you'll have to meet them. And he came with Gary. We started studying together. Don't lie. You practically lived in my dorm room, Hayden teased. You had the best one, she said, laughing nervously. Anyway, we hit it off from the first night. We've been through a lot together. A ton, Hayden threw in, smiling at her. Mark gave a tight smile as he asked another series of questions about Hayden. Leah shared some of her favorite memories, and she and Hayden laughed at inside jokes. Mark nodded in all the right places, and when he knew Hayden was watching, he kissed Leah on the forehead. Hayden narrowed his eyes slightly and coughed, looking away. As dinner progressed, Hayden noted without surprise that he and Mark had nothing in common. Nothing other than Leah. Tell me about your day, darling, Mark said once the food was cleared away. Darling? He calls her darling? That's gross, Hayden thought. Mark put his arm around Leah. We had breakfast, kind of a tradition, Hayden said before she could. Mark raised his eyebrows. Yeah, we try to go out for breakfast every week. I've been really bad about it lately, Leah said. Mark nodded. Are we ready to go? Leah said as the bill was set on the table. Yes, Mark said. Hayden pulled out his wallet and reached for the bill. Mark snagged the paper before Hayden could get it and put down his black American Express card. It's on me, Mark said. Hayden looked from the black card to Mark and back. I don't mind, Hayden said, pulling out his visa. Please, I insist, Mark said with a tight smile. Thanks, he said, sitting there. Bowen, you need a ride home? Leah blinked and looked at him. I'll head back with Mark, she said. Hayden winced. All right then, I'm going to head off, he said, slipping out of the booth. His manners forced him to extend a hand to Mark again, shaking his. Nice to meet you. Thanks, Mark said. Bowen, he said, nodding at her. She looked up at him. Quickly she turned to Mark. I'm going to walk Dan out. I'll be right back, she said, getting excited. Mark looked annoyed behind his smile as he stood, letting Leah out and then sat alone. Leah and Hayden walked in silence out to the parking lot. Then, she said. Hayden looked at her. It was dark and the dim lights in the parking lot seemed more for decoration than their intended purpose. Still, the yellow tint cast a gentle light on her face, making her look like a goddess. She looked to the ground. Yeah, he said. Well, what did you think? Hayden leaned against the silver card. You really love this guy? She looked up at him, her eyes wide and innocent. What do you mean? He's just, Hayden said, and sighed. He's not what I pictured for you. He could feel the static in the air, the tension between them as they stood barely 2 feet apart. What? She began. She followed. What did you picture from me? Me, he thought. Not him. He breathed. Leah took a step forward. She looked down at her shoes, then back at him. Well, thank you so much for tonight. It means a lot. Hayden placed one hand on her arm, holding her. She looked down at his hand and back at him. "Yeah, you know I'd do anything for you," she said. She stopped, her hazel eyes looking into his. Hayden's hand moved up her arm to her neck, his thumb grazing her cheek. He watched as she inhaled sharply and closed her eyes, her lips parting. "She feels it too, I know she does," he thought. Hayden shut his eyes and clenched his teeth. The air was charged and he could feel his heart screaming in his chest. He opened his eyes. She glanced to the restaurant. Leah bit her lips so hard it left a faint line where her teeth had been. Took a tiny step back. Hayden moved forward. He felt her tense. "Good night, Hayden," she whispered, and without a thought, he bent down and his lips pressed her cheek. "Night, Bowen," he whispered, before removing his hand and pulling back. She paused, looking between him and the building where Mark sat, as if she were making a decision. Then he watched as she walked away and disappeared inside. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Anyway, no. Is it most